Alrighty.
All right, introduce yourself.
All right, my name's James MacGregor. I'm a flight instructor and cargo pilot. And I made a presentation here for you guys. It's accident prevention. It's based on the NTSB reports just for Michigan State between 2008 and 2022. And what we'll be covering here. So we have the introduction, then I have the non-fatal accidents, fatal accidents, prevention, and any questions anyone might have. This right here is just a little map of everywhere that there's been one in that time. The blues are non-fatal, red are unfortunately fatals. Non-fatals. So in that time frame, there are 307 accidents, which is 4 accidents every month. 71 had serious injuries, and it's vastly on takeoff and landing. So when your wheels are more or less on the pavement. This down here, actually I had some notes. This down here was an aircraft that took off and caught a gust of wind, ballooned up well under rotation speed, and after that happened, he caught side crosswind, ground loops, and you can see buckled his spar. So luckily he didn't get hurt too bad. Unfortunately, the plane wasn't so lucky. The rudder. A lot of people think this, but unfortunately not. That is not a footrest. On a lot of these accidents, what I've found is it's the yaw axis. A lot of times people balloon up, but it doesn't seem like that would have been the end of the aircraft. But then comes the yaw axis, and it's not really compensated properly. This was a very nice Cessna 185 in Michigan. He was landing. He apparently was paying a lot of attention to his GPS to figure out the wind direction. Wasn't really looking at just where the winds were coming from off smoke or the trees or wind. If you ever have a boat anchored, it will point into the wind. Any of that. He landed, caught a crosswind, didn't compensate, and that happened. You also notice on a lot of these planes, it's always the left wing. And as a lot of pilots, they'll get the PTSD from their CFI screaming, more right rudder, more right rudder. Well, just keep in mind, it's usually the left wing that gets it, so that right rudder thing. So, a loss of directional control is always a major factor, mainly on the rollout. Now, here's one thing that I've noticed too. On a lot of these accidents that you see, the aircraft, they don't start off exactly over the center line. As a flight instructor will tell you, a lot of times you can tell the landing by the approach. You know, someone's 3 miles out, I can tell you if it's going to be a really bad landing. In the private pilot ACS, it says you're supposed to get your private, land, minimum float, but with your longitudinal axis aligned and over the runway center line. We step this up one notch. For the ATP, it says the runway center line must be between your main landing gears. So the big one is, if you have higher standards, you're going to have smaller saves. If you keep that plane pointed down the runway and you don't accept 2 degrees off, you use the ailerons to keep in the middle, use the rudder to keep pointing down the runway, and you just don't accept any deviation there, you don't have to make a big save. If you're sloppy with it, and then you let the airplane get almost off the runway and then correct it, now you're having to use heroics to save something that could have just been a little tap of the foot. This is an accident here. Now what you should watch on this one, this guy's coming into land. If you notice, watch his ailerons initially. Coming in, it looks great. Kind of misjudges round out, but nothing that bad so far. Touches down. Now one wing starts to come up. Watch his ailerons up here. Once they come into frame. Stick pretty much straight, and it's not until they almost hit that he does anything. Now watch the rudder. It might as well be welded straight. Now he's almost 90 degrees, the rudder's still completely straight. Lots of these online. Thankfully for this guy, it was just a wingtip. But you got to start making those corrections, small corrections early on. Really will save the day. Let's go next. Here. So the other one, don't force it. There's a big song you can always go around. I'm not going to play that. Everyone's already heard that. Stabilized approach, not just for the airliners. The airliners, we say if you're not stable by 1,000 feet, go around. That doesn't work in GA when we have a lot of aircraft that live below 1,000 feet, helicopters, float planes. But the process is still the same. If you're not stable on low approach, you're way off, you're not on center line, just go around. We'll do it burning 10 tons an hour in a 747. There's no reason not to go around. Stable approach is going to be on path, LNAV, VNAV. descent rate. So LNAV, VNAV, if you're flying IFR, it's going to be your localizer in the glide slope. If you're flying VFR, you still have the same thing. You're looking at the runway. You want to be going down the runway on the center line. And you can also look at your aim point. Old CFI phrase, your aim point shouldn't be moving. It should be staying where it is. If you're having to make massive throttle adjustments, if you're going up and down, it's not looking good, you can simply go around. A couple little rules of thumb here. Ground speed, if you want your descent rate, take your ground speed, divide it by 2, and then add a 0. So if you're coming in at 75 knots, half of that's 37.5, you should have about 375 feet per minute on the way down. It really, no matter what you're flying, should never be around 1,000 feet per minute. And if it is around 1,000 feet per minute, you want to brief it, even if you're the only one there, and ask yourself out loud, like, why am I doing this? Why do I need 1,000 feet per minute? Should never be near that. The other one is altitude when you're coming into land. You want about 300 feet for every mile away you are for the runway. Really easy one to see, and the one thing I like to tell people, if you have a runway and you know the length of it, say it's about 5,000 something feet long, it's about a mile, just in your head, take the runway. Okay, I'm 3 miles away, 3, 6, I should be about 900 feet. 2 miles, 600, 1 mile, 300. On speed, on target with normal bracketing. It's not a flight simulator. There are gusts, there's all sorts of things. But you want to be making small adjustments on everything. If you have to make big throttle adjustments, it's probably not stable. Again, just go around. And configured for landing, gear, flaps, and the big one is checklists. If you haven't run your checklist and you're on short final, that is the same thing as not having your landing gear down. Go around, because there's a chance you miss something, and it's just not worth it. When you start flying, if you fly for 135s or 121s, if you don't have your checklist done, you got to go around. That's one policy that really does carry over to absolutely everything that has a checklist. Here's another one. Just think to yourself, how many times this poor fellow could have gone around? So he's coming in, not looking too good. Oh, that's one. Still going for it. He's got to land this thing. There you go. And when your wheel ends up going in front of your airplane, that typically is not considered a good landing. So just go around. Here's another one. Now this one is a good one. What happened here is he's coming in. He's not too stable. So a couple things to watch. Think to yourself, when would you have gone around? And watch the stick. Watch the motion on the stick here. So a little steep, but not too bad. Okay. Comes in. It's a little fast. Uses back. He's ballooning it. Now watch this. He bounces, tries to put it forward to force it back. Forcing it back. And forcing it back again. Now he takes off. Not on center line, but he is in Europe, so I think they usually drive on the left side of the center line. I don't know. But either way, he got himself back to the center line. But the big one is on that stick. You really don't, in skydiving and other aviation aspects, they say pretend, your elevator type axis or your toggles have a ratchet on them. Once you pull back, you can't go forward again. You can power up, you can go around, but if you start seeing yourself doing this, it's not stable, and hopefully you don't end up with your nose wheel in front of you. Flows and checklists. This is another Michigan accident. Beautiful floats there, but unfortunately they are not facing the correct direction. As you can see, his wheels are up. If you fly amphibs, you know that if you have your wheels, down and you land on water, you're going to be flipping over before you even realize it. And the reason for this gentleman, again in Michigan, he took off. His wheels were down. He kept flying. He landed in the lake. The wheels were still down. Checklists, flows. A lot of people, single-engine airplanes, they don't really bring the gear up until they run out of runway. And a lot of things, they also say positive rate, gear up. I'm in that ballpark just because if you keep it uniform across everything, this doesn't happen. And also with a float plane, if you land an amphib gear up on a paved runway, you're just going to usually scratch your keel. Not the end of the day. This can prove to be deadly. Flows are great. What a flow is it's basically a pattern. When I used to fly the amphib caravans, we kind of would do the Holy Cross because we check our fuel, come down, our water rudders, and then left to right. Different for every airplane, but look at your checklist, work on it with an instructor, and if you have a visual thing you can do, you do that, and then the checklist is not a do list. The checklist is just to make sure you didn't miss anything on that flow. The other issue with checklists is you don't want a novel. A lot of planes I fly in, smaller GA planes, they have like these 10, 15, 20-page checklists. And it really should be simple. It's got to follow what you have in the POH, but it needs to be the items that are gonna kill you or it's skin, tin, and ticket. What's gonna damage the airplane, what's gonna damage you, or what's gonna cost you your license. The other one is if you don't have a checklist complete, like we said before, it's a go-around item, just go around. And if interrupted during your checklist, start it over. That's all there is to it. If you don't know your place, just start the whole thing over. Don't want to end up like this guy. Here is an accident here. This is very similar. This was not in Michigan, at least I don't think it was. You see the gear down, flips. This has been fatal for many, many people. Luckily for this guy, you can see him right there. Now he's got his oar trying to paddle his Skywagon back home. Triggering events. When do you put your gear down? Well, before I land. No, you don't want to do that. If you're flying IFR, some people do it 1 dot below glide slope. At work, glide slope, it's gear down, flaps 20. VFR. Some folks right when they turn base, or make sure you have a triggering event for when you do these things and do it the exact same way every single time, and you'll have the same result every single time. Call-outs, not just for multi-crew environments. I call out things that I'm doing when I'm flying alone. I mean, some people might think I'm a little weird if they're like, "Why? Who's he talking to?" But just saying it can help you not forget it and make sure you go through the checklist. Again, checklists. And mnemonics, Gumps Fits. This is one that I like. Everyone has it, whatever works for you. It's gas, undercarriage, mixture, prop, flaps, instruments, igniters, trim, transponders, switches. I've used this from when I was flying skydivers all the way up to flying jets. We run our flows to checklist. Then in my head, I'm gas, okay, we got everything. So whatever really helps you. Flows, this is something from work. What you can see here is this is a 2-crew environment. So captain, first he goes across here, then he goes here, then he goes here, then he goes right there. It's basically just a path that you're taking with your hands to make sure you memorize all the items and get everything done. After you do your flow, you go into your checklist. Also triggering events, this is for a PC-12. This guy, he comes in, this is for a circling approach, but same thing basically for a visual. He's turning more or less downwind. He wants to have a, let's see here, base leg. He's going to have his flaps 30. Coming in, he's going to lower his power setting. He's going to put his gear down, so he's entering the downwind with his gear down. His first notch of flaps. Then he's turning base, second notch, final notch, yaw damper off, his airspeeds. So basically, every time he hits downwind, he's doing this. When he's a beam, he does that. Base, he does that. He does the same thing every single time. And it really helps versus doing things ad hoc. Checklists, this is from a 185. We'll keep it simple, stupid. This is folded in half. Most checklists, you're not going to have cruise tables and little cheat sheets. This just goes to show you, this is because there's just empty space. I mean, you don't really need a humongous amount of items on a checklist. You need the critical items, you need to follow your POH or your AFM, but try to keep it simple into the critical items, because when the checklist is too big, too arduous, it's easy to skip over things. Energy. So you're looking at this and probably thinking, James didn't say you got the fatal accidents yet. This one was a SimCom trained private pilot, SimCom trained commercial pilot. He had over 1,400 hours, type rated in a medium-sized jet. This used to be a very nice Bonanza. And he was in, I believe, a grass field. This is in Michigan. There were trees. Powered up, he got to his speed, pulled back and rotated, pitched for his target airspeed like he would in the jet. And he started mushing towards the trees. He held his VX, perfect, I'm sure, on his airspeed, went into the trees. Thankfully, all 5 people in the family dog were able to get out of this thing before the fire took over. And I mean, you can't even, minus maybe the tail, tell what this was anymore. So that was good. The old saying, nothing is as useless as the runway you leave behind you. There's another one, nothing is as useless as the runway you leave in front of you. energy is a huge factor. If you can get that plane into ground effect, build up more speed, and then climb at VX, it's going to make all the difference in the world. We were just flying a 65 horsepower Champ with 2,800 feet density altitude in Lake City with the trees. Staying down low, getting some airspeed, and then pitching for VX is a world of difference. Back to the old CFI days, one wingspan from the wing or less is when you're in ground effect. And the low wing guys have a little bit of a cheat because that's from the wing, so they get another 2 feet to play with. Aim for the trees, don't hope over them. You don't want to mush into the trees. If you aim for those things, get the airspeed, get the energy, and then pitch for your VX. So you're staying in ground effect, you're pitching for your VX. Okay, I'm clear all the trees, pitching for VY for my best rate, and then you go to your in-route climb. But ground effect is a very, very good tool to use, as he unfortunately found out. This is a good one. So ground effect, think about that. Also think about yanking a plane off. You see a lot of people, the panic response, the startle response, they start trying to pull an airplane off the runway. Oh, I'm running out of runway. That doesn't help because yes, you're creating more lift, but if you remember, lift also creates induced drag, and that's going to slow you down. In a tail wheel, if you hit that tail wheel on the ground, that's also going to slow you down. Fuel planning. You can never have too much fuel unless you're on fire. Well, no, you can't have too much fuel. If it's a really difficult strip that you're taking off of in the trees, and 15, 20 minutes away, there's a nice 5,000 foot paved runway with a beautiful FBO, nice cookies, and all the fuel in the world, you don't really need to take off with a gazillion pounds of fuel in there. You can lighten your load a little bit. You can also think about density altitude. Maybe we should wake up a little earlier and take off when it's cooler outside and not take off in the middle of the afternoon. That'll help. In short field operations, read your manual. You'll notice on this, I'll kind of point a few things out. So this guy, notice he's not on his brakes. He's already starting to roll. If we had audio, he has full power, I think, about here. You'll notice there are no flaps. This is Stenson 108. He pushes the tail up. Okay, this is looking better. But then, if you watch his elevator and his tail, boom, he hits it once, trying to pull it off. Now watch how panicked he gets on this elevator as he gets towards the end. He just wham, wham, trying to get it off. I mean, this guy, yeah, this guy needs to buy a lotto ticket. Yeah, but here's the thing on that one too. He should have just kept it, maybe rolled the wheel off, stayed low, got all the speed, then climbed over the trees. Or a few other things. The other one in this one, as I said, takeoff configurations. This is a Stenson manual. The quickest takeoff is obtained when the flap control is placed in the first notch. If you're going to do short field stuff, you're supposed to have this in the airplane. Just brush up on things. Even the pros do that. If there's a maneuver or procedure we haven't done in a while, there's a reason they make you keep this book. You don't have to have it all memorized. You can always reference it. Plus, you have all your performance charts. Which takes me to, if everyone has seen that movie, The Future's Now, Old Man, ForeFlight. This is the best thing since sliced bread. This is an example of a different airplane that I have, but you can plug in your info on here. It pulls off your phone that you have in your pocket or your iPad or whatever else, all the weather, and it tells me, based on how many people I have on there, here's my weight, the runway, the winds, and tells me with this setting, here's my ground roll, takeoff speed, climb speed. It even gives me my climb gradients. And you have this in your pocket. ForeFlight's kind of expensive, but there's a bunch of other competing apps too. I think there's Garmin Pilot, I think Seattle Avionics has something. But with this type of power we have in our pockets nowadays, and with how much aviation costs, even if you don't keep any of this, it's really cheap insurance. I'm guessing the Stenson guy would have rather paid for this than the fabric repair work. Now, unfortunately, the fatals. This one right here was a TBM. Let's see here. Yeah, this guy, he got low airspeed on final, and basically, as you can see just from the impact right here, no one survived this. He got too slow. He was coming in on approach, playing with plenty of power, plenty of everything going for it, and he just got too slow and lost control of the aircraft. Unfortunately, there have been 71 fatal incidents in that time frame, 110 lives lost, averaging 5 fatals per year. That's not individuals, that's fatal crashes. interestingly enough, on most fatal crashes, there have been 2 people on board. 60% of the flights were with the passenger. Loss of control is by far the #1 leading cause. Control, flight, and train is still ranking up there, but loss of control is a huge factor. Loss of control in flight. What is loss of control? Well, what they say is if you have a pitch attitude greater than 25 degrees nose up, pitch attitude greater than 10 degrees nose down, bank more than 45, or what they say is basically your airspeed is inappropriate to conditions, you're kind of in the danger zone here. You're risking ending up in a pretty bad situation. This is another Michigan one. This was a B-58 Beechcraft. This guy was trying to take off of Mackinac Island. He had 2 aborted takeoffs. On the 3rd one, witnesses said the engine still didn't sound like it was running right. Went straight through this road, impacted over there, and 5 on board, and there was thankfully 1 survivor. But same thing, didn't sound right, took off, not going fast enough, not enough power, only 1 engine making good power, wings wobbled. He ended up, unfortunately, there. Here's a good example of loss of control in flight. This one, everyone survived, but this is a STOL event. So a few things to watch. Watch his ailerons and watch his rudder. He's coming in, very modified plane, and he's basically seeing how slow he can go. Hence the reason everyone's standing around recording this guy. So he's coming in. Now what's going to happen is he's going to end up stalling. And when he stalls, naturally 1 wing wants to drop. He makes the mistake. I'll show you here. He's coming in, and then the stall happens right about there. Oh no. I'll try to fix that. All right. Good veer to play again. All right. Okay. So the stall happens right here. 1 wing drops. As if you do stalls, a lot of planes, 1 wing is going to drop unless all the conditions are perfectly ideal. Well, what happened here is that wing dropped, and he took the stick and he tried to pick the wing back up. So see this aileron full. I don't think it has any more deflection than that. This one's hard to tell, but if this one's that high up, you can tell the other one's all the way down. What's that going to do? It's going to stall this wing even more. The other issue is look at that rudder. Like that one plane that had the ground loop, it might as well be welded. It's perfectly straight. Now when I unpause it, all that aileron deflection in there, minus I think this one just broke. But if you look at the rudder, still pretty much totally straight. And thankfully for him, he was going very slow, giant bush tires, and he just ended up costing a lot of money. But the big thing there is, as we say in aviation, you got to step on the ball. For one, keep the plane coordinated. Keep the ball in the center. It's going to make the plane fly faster. Your passengers will feel less airsick. And if you stall and the ball is center, that's probably not going to happen. But if it happens and a wing drops, your ailerons are not your salvation. Just step on the high wing. This wing drops, that one goes up, step on the high wing. If you're an IMC and you have your turn coordinator with the little baby airplane, 1 wing drops, step on the high wing. Let's see. Okay. Made it. Aha. That's enough of you, buddy. All right, this is from a French study, hence the reason things are spelled all weird. But pretty much the air over there is more or less the same over here. Visual maneuver and final turn, this is VFR, this is IFR. The kind of your turn, your base to final. Not the highest amount of fatality, but it's the same VFR and IFR. Very short final landing. You'll notice IFR guys are crashing almost twice as much. So something to keep in mind. But interestingly enough, on the missed approach, it seems like it's the VFR guys that are having some more issues, possibly because IFR guys are practicing go-arounds all the time. It's a standard thing you practice. Sometimes the VFR pilots aren't as versed in that, but it's a maneuver, especially if you're VFR, you probably want to practice a lot. And getting up with a good instructor and practicing some landing configuration stalls, if you're an IFR pilot, would be a good idea. How can we prevent fatals? Airspeed. You got to have the airspeed. There's a reason you look at Cherry Fest, you're like, well, they go way above, I mean, they're 90 degrees up and they're knife edge. They're going really, really fast. Airspeed's your friend. You got to have the speed for the maneuver you're doing. If you're entering a steep turn, obviously your airspeed, we all know, is going to increase, that you're going to have so you don't stall. Step on the ball, step on the high wing, and return to a stabilized approach. If you have a stabilized approach and you're locked on your airspeed and everything else, you're probably not going to have these issues. Airspeed and altitude. The lower you go, the slower you go, the bigger your risk. Again, weight and balance is another factor. The tail is where all your controllability comes from. It's just a giant lever. It controls the airplane. The further aft you move your center of gravity, the smaller that lever is. The further forward, if you look at a lot of planes that can do aerobatics and utility category, there's a reason that envelope for that category is further forward. And ForeFlight. This is the weight and balance app. I tell it how much I weigh, how much she weighs, where we're going. It says, here's your takeoff, James. It says, here's your landing. And if you run out of gas, here's that. You're all within the envelope. There's no calculations, no pencils. I just punch in where I go. Even the winds calculates everything. So really a good tool. I've even seen some people use Excel sheets for this, but we have so many tools nowadays, you know, you should have it. This is a very short presentation. This is actually a longer presentation, but I just trimmed it to the good part. This guy is basically demonstrating what you call a falling leaf stall. There's no audio on this, but it's called Turn Smart. It's an ag pilot video. And what happens is, this is something you want to do at the CFI. You go up there and you're practicing stalls. You can have the stick back and power out, and you just lock the stick back. Plane's going to stall, it's going to want to drop a wing. Well, step on the high wing. Well, now the other wing's going to want to drop. Now step on that wing, and hence the falling leaf part. Highly recommend. Here he's doing it in a turbine-powered ag plane. So if this can do it, most GA planes can do it. Highly recommend going up with an experienced CFI who's done this before and practicing this. Now here it is from the outside. Tries to drop a wing, he steps on it. Drops that wing, he steps on it. Steps on that one. It's not going to spin. I mean, case in point. And he goes through doing this some more. But this is a maneuver, falling leaf stall, that I highly recommend to people to try. CFIT. This is another one, a controlled flight into terrain that we talked about. This, a little hard to tell, but that used to be a Mooney. There are two in it. It's a fatal, near whiteout conditions, nighttime. He had an IFR on file, but he never picked up his IFR. Again, of course, you know, it's in Michigan, so we're talking Michigan flights here. He never picked up his IFR, and he never climbed to radar range. And it's a 2,300-foot ceiling, 2.5 miles visibility at the accident site, and he never climbed beyond radar range. Often it's a loss of situational awareness. You know, he was in near whiteout conditions. So a lot of times pilots will lose their horizon. There's another tailwheel airplane in all these studies that I read. He was hard VFR, and he was flying over a snow-covered, in the winter, snow-covered lake, and he lost his horizon. And he survived, but he caught his wingtip and totaled a Super Cub. And this guy, I believe, he was a professional pilot, a jet pilot, tons of hours in the Super Cub. So it can happen. Like it can happen to anyone. I personally enjoy in my planes having a little attitude indicator if I can. VFR into IMC, or what some people call double IMC, inadvertent IMC. This is a huge factor. If you're not instrument rated, it's worth the money. And know your area, know when to call it, and quit looking out the window and fess up. Tell ATC, tell them what help you need. Also, it's good to go over your charts, find what your minimum, your max elevation figure is in your area. I'll cover that in a second. Aircraft performance in rising terrain, trying to climb over terrain that you can't climb over. That's another cause. Density altitude winds. A lot of pilots will go up in the mountains. They won't really be wind aware. Instead of going on the side, they'll give them a little bit of boost. They'll go on the side that gives them sink. That's another cause as well. I am not paid by ForeFlight, I swear, guys. But this is ForeFlight again. I just said I want to go from Burlington to Saranac Lake, and I want to go 4,000 feet. Okay, it drew this big swath on this way, and he goes, oh, James, you're going to impact right here. Yep, it's a mountain right here. So, I might want to adjust that to 6,000 or a little higher then. It also shows you your winds and everything else. It shows your first strike was within 32 miles. Another thing it'll show on here on some of the four flights, depending on which version you get, and some of the other programs do as well. Height, basically, if I'm at this height, I'm probably I'm not going to clear things by a lot, but I'm going to clear things. This is not here, by the way. This was at my house. So wherever I go, it knows all the elevations. It has a downloaded database of them. So if you end up in double IMC, fly the airplane, look down here and know, okay, I need to get to this altitude. So really great tools to have. Again, swear I'm not paid by ForeFlight. Another thing you can have, you have a Stratus. It's a little portable box. You can get them battery powered, hooks to ForeFlight. It'll actually, unlike this, it'll give you pitch, attitude. It'll show ADSB targets. And the reason everything's red, again, I was in my living room, it'll show you towers. It'll show you anything you might hit. Really nice to have. Even if you have a plane with a very basic panel, or something without an electrical system, you can get a little mount for your iPhone, put it right there. Great situational aid. Another app that I like, this is completely free, called Windy. People in Alaska know about this, but we have METAR's TAFs. We have now MOS forecasts that are almost as good as the TAFs and ForeFlight, but webcams. You can read all you want and listen to meteorologists are the best people on earth. You can listen to everything they say, and it's usually really good. However, looking out the window, you can't beat it. And one nice thing with Windy is you have about a gazillion layers. This is showing clouds. It can show hurricanes, rainfall, winds, you name it. But it has a layer on there that will show all the webcams. And you can click one of the webcams, and then this is 24 hours. This was 2 hours, 4 minutes from when I took it. You can rewind, go forward, and see what's actually trending like visually. Really great tool, and it's free. So Windy is a really good app for that. Prevention. Practice slow flight. Really good to get on the backside of the power curve. Really be familiar with how your plane feels when it's about to come loose, when it's about to stall. Falling leaf stalls, as we spoke of. Spins, if you have an aircraft that can do spins and a qualified CFI, definitely, even if you're not ever going to become a CFI yourself, it's worth its weight in gold. I forget who it was that said, what we don't know, what we fear. And putting a plane into a spin, bringing it out, getting that whole experience really is going to show you a whole lot and make you a lot safer pilot. Another thing I'd recommend, if you want to do an extra 300 or a PITS, go for it, but try to do it in an airplane that most closely resembles what you fly. Unless you're flying an extra 300, then do it an extra 300. More recurrent training. Flight review, we used to call the BFR, biannual flight review. You have to legally do them once every 2 years. Professional single pilot guys who do IFR have to do a check ride every 6 months. Some of the FOs and VFR guys every year. But you're going to go flying anyway. Why not take a CFI with you, maybe learn something, and also you have all the deviations. You kind of get off the path a little bit as time goes on as what's acceptable. And my landings are great. Well, then you go up with a guy, hey, why was your nose wheel not on the center line? Oh, I didn't really think about that. I knew about it, but no one ever called you on it. So sometimes it's nice to have a second set of eyes, like a CFI, to keep you honest. Use of technologies, I've talked about that a lot. We have so much now that really can make your flying easier, safer, better, and you can spend more time in the air, less time on the ground. The final one is add more ratings. I fly a lot with people for work, and there'll be an ATP multi-engine with their type, commercial single engine, a CFI that expired a long time ago. And then we have guys who will be an ATP multi-engine land, multi-engine sea, commercial airplane, commercial glider, commercial helicopter, SUAS, all these things. And usually the guys who have that huge repertoire, they don't end up scaring me. And they also end up making for really good conversation. The guys who are kind of the one-trick pony, they do the job, they're safe. But especially for people who aren't doing this professionally, add another rating. You have to do a flight review every 2 years. Why not go up and get your seaplane rating? It's really fun. or go get your glider rating. That is, I mean, I think every single Top Gun or every single ace and astronaut has been a glider pilot. Captain Sully was a glider pilot. If you want to spend a lot of money and have fun, helicopters are great. And be humble and be a learning sponge. I mean, if you look at, even if you're John and Martha, with every single possible certificate and endorsement and everything else, there's so many different ways you can do the same task appropriately that humans don't live long enough. You're never going to have every single way of doing every single task appropriately for every single rating and every single aircraft. It's not going to happen. So there's always something left to learn, and be humble, you know. It's kind of like the story with the guy who was flying in the jet, and he goes, oh, ATC, what's my airspeed? And he goes, oh, you're 500 knots. And then another guy's, you're 600. And then apparently there's an SR-71 that just decided to key up and, oh, how fast am I going? He was going a notch faster. Always be humble. You know, be a learning sponge. And that's all I got. If you have any questions, you know, feel free to ask.
So there's a couple of accidents that are a little closer to my area in Traverse City. I had a student pilot and his instructor flying into Traverse City, runway 18, and I have flown that when I was training.
Yeah.
Tens, if not hundreds of times, and you're flying over an area where there's really no place to ditch.
Yeah.
So if the engine goes out and you're flying in at the respected altitude before you come in for the landing, you either have the athletic football field from the high school, or you've got the Civic Center. I can't count how many times I've looked. If I had a ditch, where would I go?
Yeah.
On that one, my flight instructor said, from now on, come in 500 feet higher.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And just have that glide to be able to make it in. And fortunately, the instructor and the student both lived.
Okay.
They landed in the Civic Center. I don't know if you've seen that area, but it is heavily wooded, heavily treed. But he was able to make it in and landed into a snow fence.
Nice.
Incredibly lucky. Now, in another case, coming into Beaver Island, I still don't know, looking back, if weather was a factor in it, but everybody, but I think 2 people perished.
Yeah. That was the charter one, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah. Right on the field, too. Yeah. I think for a lot of them, I mean, if you're going to be really high, it's the same thing I said with 1,000 feet per minute. I didn't say don't do 1,000 feet, but if anything's going to be outside like a stabilized approach, just brief it. Coming in high because there's a lot of terrain, that's something to brief. Some runways that you go into, they're one way in, one way out. After a certain point, whether you like it or not, the plane's going to be on the ground. And these are things that's good to brief and good to think of also a ways away. You know, if you're flying in there at 110 knots, I like to work on that ahead of time. Also, you know, technology, you know, you have Google Earth, you have all these things. If you go to an airport that you're unfamiliar with, take a look at it. You know, where am I going to put the plane down? Even for takeoff, when we run takeoff numbers, we have an engine out procedure for every single airport. Sometimes it's turn to this heading, turn to that heading, climb to this. And even if you don't have that technology, you do have that technology. You have Google, you have all these different resources. You can say, hey, if I lose the engine below this altitude, there's a golf course. You know, it works, ask Harrison Ford. There's a golf course right over here that you can land at. Or over here, you know, there's an abandoned runway that turned into a race car track. Or, you know, we have all these tools to do that. So I definitely agree with you. It's really good to know your landing environment and the pitfalls. And yeah, sometimes you have to come in a little higher, but brief it earlier and think of, you know, okay, how are we going to mitigate this? Okay, we're going to use a different flap setting, or we can, you know, one thing I've always said is slips. Given enough flight hours, a slip will save your bacon. Slips are something that should be in every pilot's repertoire. Like not in the work airplane, but in other airplanes, I use slips as, you know, as some people can tell you a lot, and they are a humongous saver. But yeah, thank you for that. Anything else? Well, perfect. Thank you, guys.